Begin the current Daf, Mesech Daf Lamed Vav. We begin on the top line of the Yamin. The Gemara continues the discussion of the previous Daf, comparing the halacha of our Mishnah, which opened up this parak, the last parak of Mesech parak Mashilin, regarding lowering payers down through a skylight on Yom Tov, to another halacha that brought in Mesech Shabbos regarding moving boxes, because you need room for the Talmidim to learn or for the guests, and the Gemara continues contrasting those two cases. Today's Daf. Some things we're going to discuss in today's Daf are whether an item may be moved only for the sake of a non-muktzah item or even for a muktzah item. Machlek is between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda regarding, which we mentioned many times in Mesech Shabbos, regarding muktzah, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, something that's unintended, and psikresh if it's inevitable. Cases of graf shalrei regarding a muktzah item, but it's repulsive, like a bucket of excrement, which allows one to move it because of kavod abrius. Items of reshus and mitzvah, which, although that there's an element of performing them as a mitzvah, but they're forbidden on Yom Tov because of shvus, because it is a d'Rabbanan. So the key terms of concept we're discussing today's daf are shvus, which is the issur d'Rabbanan of engaged in certain activities, where the Torah tells you that you have to desist from certain activities. Graf shalrei is literally a bucket of excrement, where that is waste matter, which obviously it's muktzah, there's no utility for it, but it's actually permissible to move because of kavod abrius. Tzarich l'chol nefesh is something that's needed for food purposes, which is permitted to do a malacha for that on Yom Tov. Now, continuing from the previous topic, we first compared, as we mentioned, the Mishnah Mesech Shabbos, which says that you could clear out 4 or 5 boxes of straw and grain because of guests and because of the students need to place in the Beis Medrash. To our Mishnah of Mashilin Peres Derech Harub B'Yom Tov, you said you could lower the produce that you're drying out the grain on the roof. You could lower it through the skylight on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos. But the Gemara wanted to know how much it would be considered a regular tircha, not a tircha yisera. So he said, let's compare it to the Mishnah Mesech Shabbos. Just to go over there, it's 4 or 5 boxes. Zero, so that quantity of saw, which places around 15-20, that's how much you'd be able to lower. Now, however, the Gemara presents 2 reasons, both ways. Either to be mekel in the case of mefanen on Shabbos, and to be machmer in the case of mashil on Yom Tov, and then as we'll say the other way too. But there's these elements, and it's going to be important for our Gemara is going to continue discussion. They're trying to compare the 2 cases and contrasting and say not necessarily. Why would we be mekel in the case of mefanen on Shabbos, which is about moving the boxes for the yeshiva students, and be machmer in our case of mashil Yom Tov? Maybe that we wouldn't even let you lower that much amount of produce from the skylight, because by the case of mefanen, there's bittul Beitzah Medrash. We're not going to have people learning, so therefore we're going to be lenient. But Mashilin, there's no bittul Beitzah Medrash, so maybe we wouldn't be so lenient to let you lower that much produce. A second reason is Shabbos is very chomer, and even if we're going to be lenient, let you move a lot of boxes, 4 or 5 boxes, you're not going to come to be disgraceful. Yom Tov is more mekel, so if we're going to let you that much, you might come to be disgraceful. So that's maybe why we'd be actually be more machmer by Yom Tov in our Mishnah than in that Mishnah Mesech Shabbos. Additionally, the Gemara presents 2 reasons also the other way. Actually, why would be more machmer in the case of mefanen Shabbos? And actually, we should be maybe more mekel in the case of Mishnah Yom Tov. Actually, we should maybe let you more than 4 or 5 boxes. Why should we be more mekel on Yom Tov? Because we're machmer in the case of Shabbos, because over there's no hefsid mammon. It's just regarding yeshiva, place for yeshiva students. Okay, so we'll let you 4 or 5 boxes. Here, there's a hefsid mammon, because you're going to lose, the produce is going to get ruined from the rain. Maybe we should be more mekel. A second reason is that Shabbos, the reason why it's aser, more than 4 or 5 boxes, because Shabbos is very chomer. Yom Tov is more kal, so maybe we should be more mekel and actually let you move more than 4 or 5 boxes worth through the skylight. And therefore the Gemara, as we're going to continue right now, applies these distinctions to the following halachas of our Mishnah of Mashilin, and regarding the Mishnah of Mesech Shabbos of mefanen, and we're going to keep in mind those distinctions. As the Gemara now begins on the Lam and Aleph, on the top line of the Yom. Hasam Tanan. There in the Mishnah Mesech Shabbos we learned, in other words, the Gemara is coming to ask another question. We had already asked question number 1 on the previous daf regarding how much produce can you lower through the skylight, and we tried to compare it to the Mishnah Mesech Shabbos. Now we're continuing to compare and contrast. And now we're going to try to compare the other way. The Mishnah said over there, that, okay, you can clear out 4 or 5 boxes. On Shabbos, we need room for guests, we need room for the yeshiva students, but not a storehouse. Now, Shmuel said over there in Mesech Shabbos, so what does it mean, but you can't clear out a storehouse if you need space? It means that you cannot totally clear out the storehouse. Meaning if, let's say, there was only 4 or 5 boxes in that whole storage area, which, although generally they permit you to go ahead and clear out 4 or 5 boxes when there are more than 4 or 5 boxes. Here, if there's only 4 or 5 boxes, no, they didn't let you totally clear out the area to reveal the ground totally. Why? Because Dilma, maybe there's going to be a pit somewhere on the ground, and now you're going to see the whole floor because you just cleared out all the boxes. And also, you're going to come to smooth out the pits, and that's going to be a problem about chayrish, or whatever it is on the floor, and therefore we don't let you totally clear it out. Okay, that's the halacha in the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos. Now, continuing the thing we said from the previous daf, Hachol be here in our Mishnah regarding that you're allowed to lower the produce through the skylight. Which, are you allowed to finish off clearing out the roof? What's the halacha where also the earthenware roof, you also might smooth out a pit? Should we compare the two halachas again from that Mishnah to our Mishnah? What's the question? So, as we already mentioned the variables both ways, we don't know which one should be more chum, which one should be more kal. On the one hand, you'll say Hasam hu b'Shabbos to Aser. Over there, yes, by Shabbos we don't let you totally clear out the space. Mishum the chum, because Shabbos is very chum. We have to be very stringent, and we don't want to come to a situation where you might come to clear out a hole in the ground. Al Yom Tov the kill, but Yom Tov that's more makel. Okay, Shabbat Dami, maybe I'm going to let you totally clear out the produce that's on the roof. Maybe the other way around. Hasam de kubitl mesamed yishamalai. Over there, where you even had a potential of learning Torah, and you tell me no, you're not totally clear it out because you're concerned about shavut gumois. So hachet like a bitl besamed shlakol. You can hear in the case of the produce where it's nothing to do with bitl besamed. Isn't all the more so for sure that we're not going to let you clear out the produce from the roof? That's question number 2. Another question, says the Gemara, is v'hachatnan. The third question is now going the other way from our Mishnah, comparing it to that Mishnah over there. Here in our Mishnah, we learned that Mashilun Peres Derech Aruva B'Yamtiv, that you could lower the produce through the skylight. And Yamtiv, that was the halacha of our Mishnah on the previous daf. Now, V'amar Rav Nachman, we had mentioned Rav Nachman qualifies this teaching, and he says, we only said it on that roof itself, meaning if the skylight is in the roof where the produce is, but let's say you have to take it from roof to roof, that the other roof, let's say, has the skylight, then you're not allowed to go ahead and take the produce to lower it down because the rain is coming. Now, similar in the Beitzah, same idea. You're not allowed to move the produce on the roof where you're coming to lower it because of the rain, from one roof to another roof. I feel like you're saying even if the roofs of the two homes are shovin, are equal, which means one roof is not higher than the other one, that it should be a tircha, an effort of taking it lower up or higher down. It doesn't make a difference. You can't take it from roof to roof. The question is, Hasam over there in Mishnah Masechta Shabbos regarding moving the boxes, what would you say? Are you allowed to move the boxes only in the same storage area or even to another area? What's the question? As we already mentioned, the variables that there's reasons to be more machmer by Shabbos, on the other hand, there's also reason to be more make on that case. The kill, maybe over here the reason why we say it's forbidden to take it from roof to roof is because it's talking about Yom Tov, which is a more lenient type of a holiday. Vassal is a zulibay, and therefore you're going to be disgraceful for it, and therefore we're machmer, we don't let you take it from roof to roof. Shabbos the Chanira, Shabbos which is very stringent. Everyone knows Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos is very, very severe, but also is a zulibay. And no one's going to come to be disgraceful if we make a certain leniency to be more lenient. So maybe Shabbat Dami, maybe it's okay to even take it from one area to another area. Maybe no. If over here in the case of our Mishnah, Dike Hefsid Pairs where there's a loss of the produce, it's like the guy's going to lose a lot of money. Still, I'm going to let you save it from roof to roof. He's not letting him move it because of the rain. So Hassan, the like Hefsid Pairs, there was not even a loss of produce. It's just for the yeshiva students or for the guests. Like Kalshin, isn't all the more so that for sure you're not going to take it from area to area. So that's another case that's questionable. Then a fourth question that we have, Hachatznan, which is really Tanya. Here we learned in the Brisa that let's say if the roof is surrounded with walls, there's no skylight, but there's a window in the wall that will let you take it to the courtyard or to the house. So the Brisa teaches, Lo yishal shalem, you're not allowed to lower down in sacks, b'chevel with a rope, b'chaloinos through the windows. Because that's a tirchari, that's the exertion to lift it up from the roof to the window and from there down to the ground. And also below you read them derech tulamis, and I'll lower it down through ladders, or like Rashi says, any step is called a ladder, and even ramps are called ladders. It could only be straight down, you push it down the skylight. But if you have to pick it up to put it through a window, or if you have to go ahead and put it down through steps, that wasn't permitted in our Mishnah Mashila. So the question is again, Hasamai, what would you say over there in regards to the moving of the 4 or 5 boxes because of the Archam or the Tamidim in the case of Mishnah Masechta Shabbos? As we said, you could have variables mitztadim lekan, stadim lekan. As we said, maybe over here by Yom Tov we're going to say it's forbidden. There's no loss of learning of Torah, so therefore we're not going to be makel if it's not just straight down a skylight. Shabbos take a bit of but Shabbos where there's going to be a loss of learning Torah, Shabbos then maybe would let you even if it takes heaving it up through a window or taking it down through a steps. Like then maybe no the other way around. It has some payers. Here where there's a loss of produce, he said you're not allowed to. Hasam look at the payers like there was not a loss of produce, isn't it all the more so that for sure you shouldn't be allowed to? That says the Gemara regarding all these questions that we asked, takeaway, which is tishbi yataretz kushas v'yabayas, that the question left unresolved regarding the comparison of the two cases, because like we said, there's variables to say what Shabbos should be more machmer and Yom Tov more kal. On the other hand, we said there's reasons why Yom Tov should be more machmer and Shabbos more kal, and because of that, we don't know which one we should compare regarding their appropriate halachas. Now, we said in the Mishnah that u'mechasenes haperis, you're allowed to go ahead and cover the produce when it's dripping in the house, the rain. You're allowed to cover the produce. Now we have a machlekes exactly to what extent is this halacha said. Ama'ula. He says the fila avera de livni. He says even if let's say you have bricks that are piled up and they're separated for construction, and it's raining in, and you're afraid that now the bricks are going to get ruined, they're going to get dissolved. So you're allowed to take some vessels, tarp, whatever it is, and to use them to cover those bricks. And we don't say that since the bricks themselves cannot be moved because they're muktzah, they're meant for construction, so to that kli, that mat, whatever it is, cannot be moved for them. Says, oh no, you can move the kli even for these bricks. Whereas Rabbi Yitzchak, he disagrees. He says, no, it's specifically peiros or ru'uyim. It's only if you have produce that's fit to be moved. That's where the Rabbanan permitted you to move kalim for their needs to cover them from the rain. But something that it itself cannot be moved, you cannot move a kli for their purposes. And it goes according to his reasoning. Because Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, a vessel cannot be moved only if it's for the purposes of the davar nitla Shabbos, for something itself that can be moved on Shabbos. But you can't move the bowl for something that is muktzah itself. The Gemara attempts to bring sources to support these opinions of the machlekes of Ula and Rabbi Yitzchak. So Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, and a few of these rayas are from our Mishnah. Said mechasnes haperis bekelim. It said that you could cover the produce with vessels. Sounds like perisin, specifically produce, but aver delivni loy, but the bricks not. So that sounds like Rabbi Yitzchak and not like Ula, because according to Ula, why are you picking of? You're saying that you could cover the drip for Paris are movable, but it sounds like something that's muktzah would not be allowed to, like Rabbi Yitzchak, not like Ula. Says the Gemara, no, who didn't the filaver the livni? The truth is, even for bricks, you're allowed to go ahead and cover them because when it's raining in the house. But the idea the Tanariation Mishil and Paris, since the first case that we mentioned in the Mishnah was specifically for Paris that are fit to be moved, because obviously it has to be something that's fit to be moved, because that was the whole halacha that we're saying you're moving them and you're lowering them down through the skylight, like we said when they're drying up on the roof and it's about to rain. So therefore, the next case regarding covering something, we also pick Paris or Ru'uyim. And therefore, Tana Sefer, now in Mechas Mesa Paris, we learned in the Sefer also that you're allowed to cover the Paris. But the truth is, the Sefer is not precise. Doesn't mean necessarily for Paris. It would even be for bricks. Because you can move a Kli, even let's say, Dava She'en Natal, like Ula says. But then the Gemara says, nah. But then again, the next thing the Mishnah said was, so too regarding jugs of wine and jugs of oil. Now the difficulty is, no one spoke about, in the previous case, jugs of wine and jugs of oil. And since you're coming to tell me other things that you could cover because of the rain, besides Paris, so then you should have said bricks, which are muktzah, which Ula says is allowed to be covered too. For sure, jugs of wine, jugs of oil, it sounds like no, specifically the jugs of wine, jugs of oil, which are things that can be moved themselves, you can move a kli for them. So again, that also sounds like, not like Ula. Says, no, my skin, what are we talking about is betivla. We're talking about that wine is untight. In other words, you're right. The Mishnah is actually coming to tell you cases like bricks, because it's adding on the jugs of wine, and that's talking about that it's tevel, which you're not allowed to move because it's untight. And that's what the Mishnah was starting off by saying, Paris or Urin yet, because that was similar to the case of Mashil. And then it picked another case to tell you, even if it's not Ru'uyin to move, because it's tevel wine, still you're allowed to move a kli for that, which is actually like Ula. And actually, Hachanam Mistab. Actually, Gemara says it's actually logical to say this, like we're answering, which it would be like Ula. Because if you would think like the Gemara originally assumed, that the case that we're discussing over here are jugs of wine and jugs of oil which are permitted, so then hatan le'reshaper. So what are you really adding on? Already said produce. What are you adding on? Obviously, you must be saying a case that's muktzah, like because it's unusable, like it's temple. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a raya, because kaddish. I could tell you that it's really talking about like a bitzah, that it's movable wine because it's not temple. So why are you saying what are you adding on? I'll tell you what you're adding on. It was necessary to say the case of the jugs of wine and oil more than the case of Peres already said, because so could you would have thought to say lehefsin muruba chashushu. This would let you, my sense we don't let you on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos. It's only something that has a huge loss, which is like all your produce, your whole stock you got over there, you're drawing on the roof. That you're allowed to lower down. Lehefsin would like chashu, but for a small loss, let's say when it's raining in, because when the rain drips into the wine, that's only a small loss. Because you wait till it's Matzah Shabbos and you remove it. But the problem is the papers that gets wet are going to rot. So when it's raining in, so I can understand for the Hefsin Meruba, maybe I would let you, but for Hefsin Meruba, you wouldn't be concerned. For Kamash Malan, that's what to tell you, even Kadiyam and Kadishem, which are not going to get so ruined by wine dripping into the oil or into the wine, it just be diluted a little bit. That we're telling you, even that is allowed to be moved, and if it's not a raya to the new interpretation we're giving that it should be like ula, it's not a raya either way. The Gemara tries to attempt another raya for my Mishnah. It's not. We learned in our Mishnah that Nishn Kli Tachas Adela b'Shabbos. You're allowed to put a vessel beneath the rain that's dripping in on Shabbos. So you see that the Kli could be moved to receive the drip, which is muktzah, like over here, because it's not fit for anything, that dirty water that's dripping into the house. That's muktzah water. And still you're allowed to move the Kli to catch that. Says the Gemara, no, bedela faro. We're talking about where it's clear water, which is fit for the animal to drink. And therefore it's not muktzah water. And therefore that's why you're allowed to move the Kli. So it's not a raya to ula, it could be like a bitzah. So the Gemara says, Tashmash being another raya like ula from the following brisa. The brisa says, person machzeles, you could spread out a mat, al gabe levenim, or you can spread out a sheet on bricks, b'Shabbos and Shabbos. Now, bricks are muktzah, they're meant for building. Until you see like ula, that you're allowed to spread out a sheet of kli for that muktzah item of the bricks. So the Gemara, no, it's not a raya. Because the yata mebinyana, we're talking about where they're leftovers from building, where the chazil lemizgalaya, they're not used for construction anymore. They could use to be laid to lay on them. And therefore, it's something that's not a muktzah item. It actually has utility, and therefore it's rolled until never you can move the kli for it. But again, it could be like a bitzchak. But it says Toshmat's trying to bring another raya from the following brisa. The brisa says, "Person sells agabe avon b'Shabbos." You could spread out a sheet on stones on Shabbos, which, like Rashi explains, that these stones, why are you spreading them a sheet on them on Shabbos? Because they're drawing for use in construction. Now, when they get wet, you have to then re-dry them again. And the problem is then the cement is not going to really attach itself so well, and then it's going to take a while for the construction, so you could cover this on Shabbos. But one thing is that avonim are muktzah for construction. So you want to know, we're talking about avonim ukruzalis. We're talking about pointy stones, the chazan lebesakise, which could be useful for the crevice of wiping oneself when one relieves himself, so the bathroom. And therefore that's not a muktzah item, that's actually has a Shabbos utility. And again, therefore it could even be like a bitzchak, it's not a raya to ula, could be something that is muktzah, you're not allowed to move a kli, a machzeles, whatever it is for it. And this has a Shabbos utility. The Gemara says another attempt, Toshma, let's bring another raya, like ula. The brisa says, person machzeles agabe kaveres devarim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to spread out a sheet on top of a beehive on Shabbos. Now, why would you be spreading out the sheet? Well, b'chama in the summertime because of the sun, which is harmful for the bees. And the winter time because of the rain. You can spread out a sheet. As long as you don't intend to trap the bees by covering it with that sheet, which doesn't be a problem about trapping, as long as you're not intending to do that, it's going to be okay. But one thing you see is that the beehive is muktzah, and yet you're allowed to spread out the sheet. You're allowed to move a kli. Let's say sounds like ul again, not like a bitzchak. So you want to know, hasanami derosa, they could vash. There's honey. Honey, it has a Shabbos utility. This whole last month we were all using honey all day. So it has a Shabbos utility. So the Gemara says, wait a second. I'm going to lead a book from Rav Ashi. It says, how does this make sense? I could understand in the summer months that there's honey in the beehives. And therefore that could be that it has the Shabbos utility that you're covering with the sheet. So it's let's serve the ranito. In the winter months there's no honey in the beehives. So what are you going to say? How could you say that you're allowed to move the sheets in the winter time too? So well, no, if it's necessary, there's these two loaves of honey that are left in the beehive when you take down all the honey. And that's what the bees support themselves throughout the winter months. And it's because of those two loaves that are still inside of it in the winter months that you're allowed to cover it, which all the honey in the beehive, they're made like loaves, like these combs, and these two combs that are left over there. So that it's for those two challahs that you're allowed to cover it. There's still, let's say, the ranito. So what are you talking about? Those two loaves are set aside for the bees. That's how the bees survive. You want to have your colony to have the next summer, it's for them. So that doesn't help. It's still a muktzah item. And according to Rabbi Yitzchak, you shouldn't be allowed to move it for those two loaves of honey. So the Gemara, no, what are you talking about? Shechisha v'aleim. Yes, generally they're set aside for the bees, but here the person wanted the honey really bad, and he thought about it from before Shabbos, thus making it mucha, not muktzah, and therefore you're allowed to move it, even according to Rabbi Yitzchak, that machzelas to cover that honey, because it is considered not muktzah. Says, well, wait a second. What are you telling me? If the guy didn't think about beforehand that he wanted that honey, so you're telling me it would be asa, because it would be muktzah, because we're talking about during the winter, and the only honey that's there is the honey that's generally set aside for the bees. So then I have a problem then with this Beitzah, because Adatani, instead of the Beitzah ending off its statement by saying, okay, you could take the machzelas, you could take the mat and cover the beehive in the summer and in the winter, but as long as you don't have a mind to trap the bees, which sounds like that the Beitzah wasn't able to find any differentiation regarding what it had previously said to say that it's going to be usher, until it jumped from the isurim that it was talking about regarding moving things of muktzah, which you're telling you a lot of move the matzelas, and until it went to the malach of tzeidah, trapping. Meaning, you're allowed to do this, but make sure you don't do tzeidah. Sounds like that would be the only halachic concern. No concern about tiltal or muktzah. The only concern is just make sure you don't do tzeidah, of trapping. Problem is, lifli b'lisnei b'didah. But why didn't you make a differentiation in the halacha you're talking about tiltal or muktzah itself? You could make a differentiation and find that there could be a problem in that itself. And you should have said, when we say that it's permitted to move the machzelas, only if you thought about those two honeycombs and you're going to use them on Shabbos. But if you didn't think about them, then it's going to be usher that you're not even move the machzelas, the mat, for their purposes, because according to Rabbi Yitzchak, who we're trying to interpret, the halacha is you're not allowed to move a kli, so you should have made a differentiation of Isser in the laws of Muktzah itself and not talking about that of Tzeidah, about trapping. So the Gemara says, Hachi Kama. Actually, this is what the Beitzah was saying. That even if you thought about the honey from before Shabbos, and therefore you're allowed to move the machzelas for it, like we're explaining for Rabbi Yitzchak, you could only move a kli, which is what this mat, this covering, this tarp is. For tzarech the nitlo, which the honey is something that is nitlo because you thought about it from before Shabbos, still the Beitzah is going to teach you, but as long as you're not intending to trap it, meaning we're not trying to tell you a case that could be asa. Yeah, we could have told you a case of asa muktzah when you didn't think about it. But our point was saying that even when it is mutter, because the laws of muktzah, just make sure that you don't have an intention to additionally trap the bees, because then you would have a different problem. Then you would have a problem that even though you're primarily trying to save them from the rain, you would be then violating the malach of tzeidah. So that's just what it's saying. Not trying to find something like usher and tiltal. We could have found something like usher and tiltal. We're just trying to say, even when it's mutter, it could be a different halachic problem. Be careful. Don't intend to trap it. So the Gemara says, wait a second. That also doesn't make sense. But Maya Kimta, how you explain this Beitzah? Obviously, Rabbi Yehuda, the Islay Muktzah. Obviously, you're explaining the Beitzah like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that holds of the general consensus of Muktzah. In other words, really, you could have answered originally by the first part of the Beitzah that you could have said, who's the time of the Beitzah? It's Reb Shimon, who doesn't hold of Muktzah. And that's why he allowed to cover the Machzelas. Because it doesn't hold of the general category of Muktzah. Now, the fact that you had to have what's called a Deichik Teretz, and you had to say, oh, you're right, really, we're not going to move something for a Muktzah item, and really the beehive is muktzah in the winter. Oh, but there's the two chalis that really the guy could think about and want to use, thus making it not muktzah, and which like Rabbi Yehuda, who we have to be concerned for muktzah, and if you let him move themselves for that, so if that's the case that you're explaining like Rabbi Yehuda who holds a muktzah, the problem is ema seifa. Look at the last line that we just mentioned before. The Beitzah says, okay, as long as you don't intend to trap it, which sounds like even though you are trapping it, as long as you're not intending to trap it. Problem is, Rabbi Shimon, that actually sounds like Rabbi Shimon, not like Rabbi Yehuda. Because the Amar, he says, it's Rabbi Shimon who holds, as long as you're not intending to do a malach, even though malach is going to be done, it's going to be permitted. So, I don't understand. You're interpreting the Reisha of the Beitzah for Yitzchak, who evidently holds like Rabbi Yehuda, because you're telling me you have to find a way to say that why it's not going to be a muktzah item. According to Rabbi Shimon, it doesn't care about muktzah unless something extreme like drying figs or whatever. Everything else is not muktzah. So of course you can put the machzels over because it's not muktzah as it is anyway. But you have to tell me no, really it's not muktzah because of the tulot. So obviously you're saying it's like a Yehuda. But then look at the last statement. The last statement sounds like Rabbi Shimon. So Shimon says, what are you talking about? B'tizba Rabbi Shimon? Are you really entertained to say the same as Rabbi Shimon? Even Rabbi Shimon wouldn't say the way you're interpreting that line. Because they both say, Shimon agrees by what's called chopping off the head of the chicken, and it's not going to die. Of course it's going to die. Even though you're not intending to, I just want the head, it's going to inevitably die. So Shimon agrees to something that's inevitable, that it's going to be usher. So you're also, I'm not intending to trap the bees. Hello, you're covering the beehive. It's inevitable that it's going to happen. So how are you going to say that it's like Rabbi Shimon? Even Rabbi Shimon should agree that it's to be usher, even though you're not intending to. So Ella, rather, so says the Gemara, no, it's like we were saying before, which obviously the Gemara was attempting to explain to Rabbi Yitzchak, that even like Rabbi Yehuda, that holds the muktzah, the halacha, the reish is not going to be difficult on him, that you're allowed to use the kli, the machzelas, to cover, even though it's not a muktzah item, to explain, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, who are going like would hold it would be a problem, because like we said, of those two loaves of honey that are inside the beehive. But then, how do we understand the last statement we're saying right now? What does that help? According to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds anyway, so the Gemara explains. What are we explaining here? What's the case over here? It's just come on, where the beehive has windows in its walls. So even though you're covering the opening of the beehive, the bees are not trapped if you don't also cover the windows of the beehive. And the Gemara slightly amends the words of the Beitzah. The late time of Yehuda don't say according to Yehuda ubavachli skavamotzed, as long as you're not intending to trap it. Rather, as we continue to base, Alaima rather say ubavachli asena mitsuda, as long as you don't make it into a trap, meaning to say don't close the windows. So that's what it really means. That when we say don't intend to, it doesn't mean just it's just in your kavana. It means to say be careful not to do that, because you could cover the beehive so it's going to protect it from the elements, from the sun, from the rain, but don't do it in a way that's going to trap it. So then the Gemara says, I understand. Pshita, well, that's pretty obvious. Since reviewed the whole davashem miskab and something that's unintended is going to be usher, so why does the Bryce have to say, as long as you don't make it into a trap? Say there's a ab malacha. It's one of the lamtas malachas. And of course you have to be careful. I mean, according to Shimon, I can understand you maybe, it's a chiddush to say you have to be careful because if it's unintended and it's not inevitable, so it's going to be mutter. But according to Yehuda, he'll double shem miskab and zasa. So of course it's going to be usher that you don't make it into a trap. That's the malach of tzeder, of trapping. So the Gemara says, no, I'll tell you what the chiddush is. Ma'odetem, what would you say? B'minay natzud, something that it's the norm to trap their species, like a wild animal or a bird. That's something that people generally trap. They hunt for these things. So that's where usher would be forbidden to go ahead and trap them, even though it's not intended. But if it's not the type of species that are generally trapped, then I would tell you mutter that maybe it would be permitted, because the malacha of tzeder is only the things that are normally trapped. That's the chiddush that we're saying, that even though we're talking about something that not necessarily would it be trapped for the purposes of trapping it, because people don't usually want to catch the bees. They want bees to go ahead and produce things, but it's not something that you want to trap it for itself. So maybe you would have said that it wouldn't be Muktzah. That's the Kamash Malon that was saying that even though it's Ein B'minei Nitzad, like a regular bug that has those leniencies in halacha because it's Ein B'minei Nitzad, which is not the Malacha D'Oraisa, that's the Chiddush that was saying that even over there, that you cannot make it into a trap, make sure you don't cover the windows. That was the Chiddush that Rabbi Huda was saying. That's one approach. Now, Rabbi Shloimy, he says that the truth is, like we had originally explained, that actually, that there is honey in the beehive for humans. Now, the question we had asked originally was, I understand, that only works in the summer months. Summer months is when there's honey in the beehive, so I could understand according to Yitzchak why it's not difficult, why you could cover with a machzelas, because you're taking the klila tzarech davar hanitl, which honey is a davar hanitl, it's something that's by human beings. What do we do in the winter? So the first teretz the Gemara gives, you're right, winter really only has the honey for the bees, where there should be muktzah, but the guy thought about it from before Shabbos, so therefore it's not muktzah. That's how we gave him the first teretz. Now Rav Ashi is saying, no, it's talking about when you have regular honey for human beings. But what's in the winter months there's no honey? He says, no, mikatani b'moisach sham. He says, be medayek in the words. Did we say in the summer months, in the winter months? We didn't say the words b'mois. Our words were in the heat because of the heat, and in the rain because of the rain. That was the words we said. So not about summer and winter. It's actually talking about B'yami, Nisan, B'yami, Tishrei, talking about fall and spring. Talking about in Nisan time and in Tishrei time. The Ikechama v'Kikshana, where there is sun and there's also rain. And V'Kedvash, and in those months there's also honey. But in the dead of the winter, you're right, you don't have any honey, and you're right, then we wouldn't let you move the machzelas. Because like a Bitzah cold, it's only l'tzarut habanitla, and in those months, you don't have the honey for the human beings. But again, therefore, that's the second answer for a Bitzah, why it's not difficult. It's not a riot to ula that you can move a klul tzarut davar she'ein hanitl. Could be it's like a Bitzah that you can only move a tzarut davar hanitl. You can only move a vessel for something that it itself could be moved. Now we said in the Mishnah, we mentioned before, you're allowed to put a bowl, a vessel beneath. If let's say it's dripping into the house on Shabbos, you're allowed to put a bowl. Now, Tana we learned in the Beitzah, in the smalikli, what happens if, let's say, it's coming in, the water's really coming in, and the bowl fills up. So what you could do is, you could spill it out outside, and then you could do it again, bring it back to its place beneath where it's dripping, and you don't have to stop from doing this all day and keep on changing it if it's necessary. Which Taisus gives two possible explanations. Either because, as we mentioned before, in the it's a delafaro, which is the water is fit to be used for an animal to drink, so there is not muktzah. Or we're talking about that of a graf shalrei, which is to the contrary, because it's disgusting water, it's actually that permits you to move that muktzah item because of that. As the Gemara actually continues on that theme. Gemara brings a story, the room where Abaya had his mill was dull. It was dripping in, the rain was falling in on his mill. Now, it's made out of clay, and it starts dissolving because of the rain. And as Rashi points out, he didn't have enough bowls that would be necessary to catch all the rain dripping in. So also came in from the Rabbi. What should he do? So Malay said to him, I'll tell you, Zil Aile Lapuriach Lahasam. Go ahead, bring your bed over there into the room where the mill is usually kept. Now that's where you sleep. The Lahavik Graf Sharei. Now it's going to be disgusting, the mill, to be there in front of your bed. V'apke, and then you're going to be permitted to go ahead and move it and take it outside. As the Gemara is going to surely tell us that a graf sharei, something that's disgusting and repulsive, that's everyone's taking their garbage out on Shabbos. What are you doing moving these muktzah items? It's because of graf sharei. So you're allowed to go and take it out to the garbage. Here also you'll be allowed to move the mill because it's graf sharei. Great idea. Now it won't be dripping on the mill. Now Yosef Abai was sitting and he was asking. He says, wait a second. The halacha is you're not going to initially, deliberately make a graf shalrei to cause something to be disgusting, so that should be allowing you to go ahead and take it out. So how are you telling me to go ahead and move my bed over there to make it into a matzah of graf shalrei? Now the story continues that while Abai is getting falam in the yeshiva, so then actually it rained in so much that the whole thing caved in of the room with his mill of Abai. So Abai said, Tasili, this is my reward, the Arya Damar, that I violated. The Rav told me the psak, and here I am getting off alam divid. This was my reward. I didn't listen to him. Now the whole thing caved in, which Tais actually says, what pshat, isn't Abai correct? You're not allowed to make a graf shalrei ketchila. So Tais says, no, here would be permitted either because of hefsid mammon, For the Maisa al Tefsid, we would be Mekel because of the room where the mill was. Or because he says, not really Likatchila, here it already was raining in the room. Initially would be, you're making that matzah. You're not making the matzah, but here it's already raining in, so therefore it would be permitted the way Rabbah had told him. Now, continue on this theme, this primary halacha, which is often used. Amar Shul says, Graf Shulri'i, the bucket of excrement, the Avid Shemerik Lion, the bucket of urine, which Graf and Avid are both earthenware vessels. It's just the one of excrement is called Graf, and the one of urine is called Avid. Mutu Leitzin La'ashba. You're allowed to take them out to the garbage dump. Obviously, that these things are muktzah, but muktzah machmas miyas, whatever this now, but because of covenant priyas, we let the person go ahead and take it out. Now, when you bring the bucket back in, so what you have to do is you have to first put water into the bucket and bring it back. Now, the reason for this is because, like we said, these buckets are muktzah machmas miyas. They're set aside, meaning they're muktzah because of how repulsive they are. And if you don't have water in the bucket, you're not allowed to move it. Now, to take it out, you're allowed to because of the human dignity. But you wouldn't be able to take it back in now. But if you put in water, so it has utility because of the water, so then you'd be able to bring it back in, but you wouldn't be able to bring it back in as it is. Now, Savamina, they thought, from this teaching of Shmuel, the students thought that specifically graf sharei, by specifically a graf, that because there's a bucket, that's why you're allowed to move the waste matter. Agav mana in because of the bucket. But b'fnei atzmoi, but let's say you want to take the waste matter itself or some other disgusting thing in his hands and take it out, then loy, that we wouldn't permit the person to move that on Shabbos. Tashema, this is coming here from the following story. They found a mouse in the spice room of Rav Ashi. And Rav Ashi said to them, Nokte b'tzutzise, grab a hold of it from its tail, v'abkua, and throw it out. You see that you're allowed to move the muktzah item if it's disgusting, if it's graf sharei, even by itself, even without the bucket. And again, that's a heter because of kavod abriyas, because it's repulsive on the person. Now, we did halacha the next Mishnah, continuing on the prohibitions of Shabbos and Yom Tov, which we were speaking about in the previous Mishnah, the contrast between Shabbos and Yom Tov and Shabbos and Yom Tov. So this Mishnah continues on that theme. Anything that is a liability because of the rabbinic prohibition not to do it on Shabbos because of Shavuos, or Mishum Rishus. What do you mean Rishus? So Rishus is somewhere in the middle. There is some element of mitzvah, it's not such a big mitzvah. So it's somewhere like would be considered volitionary, but there's still a rabbinic prohibition. Or Mishum Mitzvah, a third category. Let's say there's a bona fide mitzvah, but still the Rabbanan said, you're not allowed to do this b'Shabbos on Shabbos. So the same thing would be Chayom Nulav, we'd be obligated not to do these things Yom Tov on Yom Tov. What are we talking about? These are the things that are forbidden Mishum Shvus, which is the first category. We spoke about Shvus, Rishus, and Mitzvah, which all these three categories are not do on Shabbos. Those three categories are also not allowed to do on Yom Tov. So what are the things that are forbidden because of the rabbinic prohibition that there's no mitzvah at all relating to them? So La'olim Be'ilon, you're not allowed to climb up on a tree, which the Gemara is going to explain all of them why they're abundant said they are rabbinically forbidden. You're not allowed to ride on an animal. You're not allowed to swim on the water. You're not allowed to clap with your hands. You're not allowed to slap with your hand on your thigh. You're not allowed to dance with your feet. Now, all of these are for purposes of joy and of music, which Gemara is going to actually explain. They're forbidden because of exeir or rabbinic concern, because you might end up fixing the musical instrument, which would be mesakin mana. You'd be making a vessel, which is not going to papish, and therefore you're not allowed to go ahead and do the clapping and the dancing. Now, second category, Ve'elehin Mishum Rishus. And the following are that we really might have permitted them because they're close to performing a mitzvah, and still the Chacham said you're not allowed to do them on Shabbos, and that's what our Mishnah is saying, the same thing applies to Yom Tov. Now again, why are we calling this Rishus? Is because the next category we're going to talk about in the Mishnah is a bona fide mitzvah, mitzvah gemur. We're going to, in that category, this middle category is called Rishus. In contrast to the first category, which is called Shavuos, because they're bona fide rabbinic issa, because there would be no reason for the Chacham to say that it shouldn't be forbidden, because there's no element of mitzvah there at all. This is a middle category, which is somewhat of a mitzvah, which is loy danin. You're not allowed to go ahead and have a court case. But you're not allowed to get engaged to a woman, which the Gemara is going to explain why they call it Rishos. Isn't that the first mitzvah of the Torah of Pirivia? And you're not allowed to do chalitza, which is when brother, when he dies without any children, to divorce his Yavama, and you're allowed to do Yibum, which is marrying that sister-in-law. Third category, the Elohim mitzvah, and these are that, even though they're really mitzvahs, still you're not allowed to do them because of rabbinic reasons on Shabbos and Yom Tov, is loy makdishin. You're not allowed to sanctify something to hektish, you're not allowed to go ahead and take an erech vow, which you say, your erech is on me, and he gives according to how old that person is, like it says in the Parshan Erech in V'yikach Zayin. You're not allowed to make a cherem vow, which you say that this animal should be cherem, which generally Charamim also go to hektish, to the Bedek Abayas. And we'll make being Truma Maisa, you're not go ahead and elevate and separate Trumas and Maisas from your table, which the Mishnah says, all these things were said on Yom Tov, Kavachem B'Shabbos, all the more so that they're forbidden on Shabbos. And then the Mishnah concludes and says that Ein Ben Yom Tov L'Shabbos, there's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos, only regarding the permissibility of doing malacha for food purposes. Now the Gemara goes back and explains all these different elements of the first category of shlos, why they're rabbinically forbidden. So we said in the Mishnah, you now go up on a tree on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Why? So the Gemara explains, we're concerned that maybe when you're climbing on the tree, you might tear off something that's connected from the tree, which that's a biblical violation of kaitzer, which is detaching from something that's attached. So therefore, rabbinically, you're not go on the tree. So the Mishnah said, you're not ride on the animal. Why? So the Gemara says, we're concerned that maybe you might go out of the tchum, because since you're not walking by foot, so you're just riding on the animal, you might not see the signs of the tchum, of the boundary. You might just end up riding out of town. So the Gemara says, wait a second, Shalami, no, we can infer from our Mishnah then that tchum d'oraisa, that the halacha of the Shabbos boundaries, the limits, is biblical. From the fact that you're saying that you were making a gzeira rabbinically of riding an animal because of the tchum, because there would be rabbinic, we wouldn't have made something else forbidden because of it. That's always called ein goyis and gzeira. And we know that it's a famous machlekes is tchum d'oraisa v'rabbanan. So seemingly from our Mishnah we see tchum d'oraisa. So the Gemara says, oh no, it's not a raya, because actually it's not because of tchumen. The reason why you're not allowed to ride an animal is for a different reason. Gzeira shemiyachtat is meira. Because maybe you might detach a branch as you're riding to hit the animal, and then it's going to be kaitzer from what's attached. That's why you're not allowed to ride an animal, and therefore it's not a riot. Next case in the Mishnah was, we said you're not allowed to go ahead and swim on the water. What's the reason for that? It's a concern that maybe you can make a barrel of those who float. Meaning, Rashi explains, it's talking about a vessel made out of a gemi, which you weave it, and you make it like a long barrel, and you learn how to swim with it, some type of a life boat, or something like that. Taisus disagrees. Taisus says like something hollow, that therefore it's going to float on the water, as we know anything that's hollow, that it floats. But be that as it may, you might come to make a life jacket, life boat, whatever it is, and because of that, you're not allowed to swim, because then you might be over on tikkun mana for that. Then the Mishnah said, you're not allowed to clap, you're not allowed to slap, you're not allowed to dance, which these are all done usually in rejoicing. What's the reason why these are forbidden? Says the Gemara, because you might make, you might fix the musical instrument, and that would be a problem. But tikkun mana, therefore you're not allowed to slap and clap and dance on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Thank you to any time.